The Main Gate, an Elise Marquette adventure by Yvonne Chorlin and read by the author. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Chapter 1. I had no more stepped out of the bathroom stall, my suitcase twisting awkwardly behind me, when my phone beeped. Stupid me. I had turned off airplane mode when the plane landed, thinking someone would be calling me about the interview. Instead, I saw a message from Theo. There was no text, only an attachment, because a civil, kind word from my eldest brother would be too much. Normal Elise would have called him and ripped him a new asshole, because I could. The new Elise wanted to hide in the airport bathroom, curl up in a ball in the handicap stall, and call it a day. Neither was an option. I was on my way to a job interview. I'd walked into the arrivals area of the Denver, Colorado airport thinking I'd have to call a cab. A man who could have been on the cover of GQ held up a sign which read, Dr. Marquette. Holy Hannah! Never had a gray t-shirt and navy cargo pants looked so good. His name was Nathan Ferrer and would be my immediate supervisor should I land this job. He was waiting for me while I hid in the bathroom, or was thinking about hiding in it. My mother's funeral was yesterday. She died a week ago. And it was about bloody time, too. I barely remember applying for this job. Larry, my former boss at Physicians for Human Rights, sent me the job posting, and his recommendation was good enough for me. Staying at my mother's hospice bedside during her last months had made my days run into each other. Things that I had thought happened days ago had actually happened weeks previous. Marian said on Sunday she needed help with her school project, I said when my elder brother Sebastian visited Mother one day. I was in my usual chair opposite Mother's bed. On a notepad I'd bought at the gift store, I was jotting down everything I'd ever learned about Çatalhöyük, an archaeological site in Turkey, so I could help my niece with her project. Sebi gave me a weird look from underneath a mop of chestnut hair. He needed a haircut. Marian hasn't been at a family dinner in 3 weeks, he said. Her project was due last week. She got an A-. Theo and Ashley took her out to the theater to celebrate. Remember? I'd pushed the job interview date back twice, much like I'd pushed Tel Aviv University, saying I needed more time before I could return to my job as an archaeological field instructor. But the field season didn't wait for anyone. After 3 years on contract, they'd let me go. I couldn't let that happen to this job interview. So I booked it for the day after the funeral. Today. The job was for a cultural liaison with the United Free Agents. An internet search found that they were a subsidiary of a U.S. company that had supplied drones and other specialty aircraft to the Allies during the Chino-Russian War of 2012 to 14, and likely made a tidy profit from killing others. Their possibly immoral history stirred some reservations in me. However, there was nothing left for me in Tel Aviv, and I couldn't go back to Calgary. There was too much history in Calgary. Too much history and too many memories. Cultural liaison definitely fit with the wheelhouse of anthropology, and I was an anthropologist, technically. While I'd spent the majority of my life either in archaeology, digging for other people's garbage, or in biological anthropology, looking for or putting dead bodies back together, it was all housed under the big academic umbrella of the anthropology discipline. If they were looking for someone with more experience with the living, then I'd regale them with stories of pissed-off landowners, obstinate industry clients, migraine-inducing military bureaucracy, and grieving next of kin. I had it all and was likely overqualified, with pending memory issues. The nightmares had also returned. Thankfully, not the nightmare that had driven me to extend my mandatory post war therapy, but all the others were back. It had been 5 years since the war ended, and that wasn't enough time for the nightmares and memories to fade. And to add a layer of icing to my cake of chaos, men were a plague on my brain. I couldn't concentrate. Men and sex on my brain all the time. Hot, steamy, lustful sex. It was a complete change in character, and I didn't know what to do with myself. Yeah, I was a mess. This was no time to be interviewing for a job, especially with the beautiful man waiting outside the bathroom. Nathan Ferrer, he had said and grinned when I'd stepped up to him and introduced myself. His lips slid to the left, creating a dimple in his cheek. Green eyes peered through dark lashes and over freckled cheeks and nose. We emailed a bit to sort out logistics for the job interview. He was the one I'd pushed off. Twice. With hints of gray in his short strawberry blonde hair, he had a gravitas about him that had me thinking about those character actors from the 1940s noir movies. I willed my tongue to form words. Right. I took his outstretched hand. His handshake was firm without being constrictive, and he held eye contact. Very old school while also being egalitarian. It wasn't just his handsome face or solid build. It wasn't his old school ways. It was that he looked at me. Really looked. And that look shook me to my core. I didn't like it one bit. There was no room in my work world for romance or men or sex. Sure, I recognized a strong body, a beautiful face. I was a biological anthropologist at heart, and it was difficult for me to not analyze the morphology of the human form. But more than that, my gut said Nathan was the full package. Good looks, intelligence, and, the real kicker, empathy. I wouldn't be able to hide from him. He would see everything, and I couldn't afford that. Looking back at me in the bathroom mirror, I saw a 40-something woman who, at this moment, looked a bit worse for wear. Rings under my tired denim blue eyes, gray hairs sprinkled my crown of red hair. My pale skin was more sallow than a healthy cream. Parentheses bracketed my mouth even when I didn't smile. My eyes and forehead had wrinkles that no longer disappeared when my face relaxed. In short, I looked like death warmed over. I needed to bury myself in some fieldwork, preferably someplace warm and sunny, and forget about the world. But my knees ached just thinking about being a shovel bum on a field crew. I was getting too old to be digging. This job promised an escape from fieldwork, Calgary, and my family. Rule number 2 of archaeology, Marquette, I reminded myself. Don't get involved with anyone on the crew. I tucked errant hairs back into my ponytail and straightened the pale blue button-up shirt I'd bought specifically for this interview. Time to land this job and move on with my life. Nathan was driving a black Humvee that looked like it should have been with a SWAT or military unit. Extra grille and rack with off-market lighting and rugged tires. Tinted windows and so much room inside I could run laps. And AC. Thank God, AC. It was only the end of April, and I was already sweating buckets. My pale blue shirt was likely showing wet spots. We had a 50-minute drive to the United Free Agents offices west of Denver, and I needed to keep my wits about me. Sitting so close to Nathan was doing nothing for my concentration. The scents of laundry soap, a hint of sandalwood, and something else lingered from his direction. Being sequestered in a vehicle for nearly an hour would be hard on my raging hormones and monkey brain. The vague job description in the posting was a good place to start. I'd appreciate the non-website version of who UFA is, I said as we pulled out of the parking lot. Constellation Engineering, UFA's mother company, had started as a group of enterprising young engineers who developed aircraft capable of high altitude and long range flight. I raised my eyebrows at this. Like the rest of the world, I'd heard how drones and aircraft had been developed to fly round trip to China from the US. The drones were preferred because they could fly above the altitude of fighter jets and didn't need to contend with human necessities. Okay, but what's that got to do with liaising with other cultures? I asked. That smirk with its dimple reappeared. You've heard of the main gate? Who hasn't? A Chinese probe launched before the war found it. It's located near Jupiter's orbit and is suggested to be a wormhole of sorts. The scientific community and alien conspiracy theorists went nuts over it when the Nature article was published a few years ago. As I spoke, my mind whirred, putting pieces together. Wait a second, I couldn't help blurting. Is UFA a space exploration company and you're putting together a first contact team? Nathan looked at me out of the corner of his eye. With one hand on the wheel, he flipped open the truck's console between us and pulled out an inch-thick folder. He let the console lid slam shut and held out the folder to me. This is UFA's standard NDA. You need to sign this before I can tell you anything more. Wow. It hands down beat any non-disclosure agreement I'd ever seen. I pointed to a timely "Rest Stop Ahead" sign. Pull over. I can't read in a moving vehicle. Nathan did a double take. I want to read this before I sign it, and I'll sign because I want to hear about the main gate. 20 minutes, a stop at a rest area, and a fresca later, I asked Nathan for a pen and today's date. April 22nd, 2019 would be a date that would change my life. Good thing I had no spouse, loathed my family, and all my friends were out of country. According to the NDA, I'd never be able to say anything to anyone, ever. Nathan took the folder, signed as witness, and replaced it inside the console. An NDA before the interview? This better be good, I said. Nathan pulled the Humvee back onto the highway and resumed our journey into the Rocky Mountains. Some of what I tell you might sound familiar. Some might have been bent to hide the truth. And some was classified before the war but has since been declassified. Before the war, China had a military research installation in Qinghai. That's near Tibet, right? Right. They were looking at propulsion technology, something about fusion and clean energy. Instead, they discovered a new way to generate extreme amounts of energy, like extreme, kind of like nuclear energy, but smaller and cleaner. Did you hear about the weapons testing that Russia accused China of just before the war in July 2011? My mind tripped back to 2011. Tel Aviv University. In July, I was in the desert of Israel. I might have heard something when I got back from the archaeological field school. Fair enough. That weapons testing, he made air quotes with his index fingers, was actually a rocket test using that new energy source. The Chinese destroyed it mid-flight so it wouldn't fall into Russian hands. Their next rocket used the first Wu Jing engine, and it launched a probe into space just before Russia invaded China. That probe discovered the main gate. 4 days after it was launched. Nathan said the last bit slowly, then paused, waiting for me to catch on. How long would it normally take for a probe or spaceship like the space shuttle to travel to Jupiter? A couple of years. Years? Star Trek made space travel look so easy and so quick. Yep, years. And the probe did it in 4 days. I sat contemplating all this when Nathan continued. You may remember that Russia started the war pretty strong. I nodded. Russia had invaded through the northern border of China and Mongolia and had decimated much of western China before the rest of the world knew what was going on. They first hit Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in Inner Mongolia, thinking the rocket was there. It wasn't. Then they turned south and aimed for the military research facility in Qinghai. China was pretty desperate for help and offered allies access to the Wujing engine if they fought against Russia. The U.S. was an ally, so Constellation Engineering got access, I pieced together. Constellation wasn't the only company, but yes, that's correct. While the Wujing engine may have started the war, it certainly helped end it. Okay, but what about the main gate? What did the probe find? There's a bit of speculation about if the main gate was already there and the Wujing engine triggered it into making itself visible, or what. We don't know. What we do know is that the Wujing engine has made many things possible, like escaping Earth's gravity and traveling to the main gate, both of which takes loads of energy. Thanks to the Wujing engine, now both are fairly easy, albeit expensive. And the main gate has made contact with extraterrestrials possible. The invention of the Wujing engine had changed everything, both during the war and after. Reliance on traditional energy sources like petroleum, water, and solar power were fading. I grew up in a world of combustion engines and climate change. I was now living in the space age and hadn't even known it. This is what archaeological fieldwork did to a person. Wait, go back, I said, still processing this new information. Was that the real reason for the war? Russia caught on about Chinese space travel and was either jealous or wanted in? Nathan shook his head. That was a little above my pay grade back then. Back then? You were in the war? I was a Marine and did a tour in China. You likely knew more than I did. I was in a warehouse looking at dead bodies all day. Or pieces of them. I grew to like the hum of the refrigeration units and jets flying over because I couldn't hear families crying. People were killing each other, and I still don't know why. Nathan paused. Maybe he was thinking about what I'd said. Maybe he was remembering his own experiences during the war. Maybe he was weighing whether or not to tell me. Maybe I'd poked where I shouldn't have poked. I was starting to wonder if Nathan was regretting getting into a vehicle with me when he spoke. According to military information, Russia had been conducting surveillance on China for at least 5 years and had been suspicious of China encroaching through Mongolia and into Russia, searching for rare minerals and other resources. It seems that Russia had been launching military incursions into Central Asia for a few years before the war to counterbalance their suspected Chinese expansion. There was quite a bit of tension in the 5 to 7 years leading up to the war. That rocket explosion over western China was just the spark that lit everything up. I leaned back into my seat and processed that. Russia had been pissed at China for years before the war. The things you don't know about someone. Thanks. How much of that was classified? It was restricted, not classified. That NDA threatened life and limb, but didn't include anything about restricted information. Nathan grinned. The NDA is for UFA's intellectual property. The Wujing engine is patented. China is making a fortune off licensing. The owners of Constellation reverse engineered the engine and created their own version, the Hyperion Drive, as well as a few other things based on that energy source. They created UFA to hold the patent of the Hyperion. They also want UFA to become a contract specialist organization for First Contact. First Contact. I was right. I sat numbly in my seat. Holy fuck. I had no snappy comeback, no immediate questions bubbling. My mind was spinning with the possibilities and all the what-ifs. Then I had a flashback to my days as a cultural resource management archaeologist, back when the petroleum industry was viable and very profitable. I could still hear the sound of a shotgun shell sliding into a barrel as one farmer explained the benefits of staying off his land to me. The only time I got close to violence was when a landowner didn't want an oil company drilling on their land. Is this going to be a peaceful first contact thing like Star Trek or slash and grab like Avatar? Because I'm not keen on perpetuating colonialism and the whole conqueror and conquered mindset. Nathan nodded and flipped his turn signal on to pass a slow moving truck on the highway. Understood. Long lasting and fruitful relationships don't start with violence and lies. UFA is aiming to perform first contact to develop relationships based on trust and peaceful coexistence. Our success determines our clients' success. But we do work for clients who have objectives that include profit margins. UFA is merely the starting point. What happens once the client steps in is out of our hands. Shit, I would not land this job. 30 minutes into this conversation, and I knew this trip was a loss. I work mostly with the dead. Yes. It wasn't a question because he said nothing more. I'm not great with the living. You're doing pretty well right now. Does the radio work? I asked, and Nathan took the hint. An oldies radio station played Don't Worry Baby by the Everly Brothers as I took in the Colorado landscape and wondered what I'd got myself into. The United Free Agents had a large complex in the Rocky Mountains. After a security check at a gate and passing through chain-link fencing topped with razor wire, we drove around a bend and into a parking lot facing a massive concrete and windowed structure that seemed to emerge from a mountain face. The edgy architecture looked more suited to Silicon Valley, and I couldn't tell how much the building was inside the mountain, maybe even beneath it. Nathan came around the vehicle with my carry-on. The owners wanted to refurbish a decommissioned missile silo, but settled on this instead, he said as I contemplated the building. That would have been cool, I forced myself to say because my mind was diving deep into some serious processing time. My mind on new information was like a snake on food. I'd gorge myself, then curl up, alone, and digest for days. This was when my introverted nature reared its head. Adhering to more extroverted societal customs went out the window, and I'd respond only in monosyllabic words, if at all. This wouldn't be a good way to present during a job interview. Come on, Marquette. Focus, I said to myself. Get through the day, and then you can contemplate the universe. More security inside a shining lobby lit by natural light coming through two-story windows. I was issued a guest pass, then Nathan escorted me upstairs to a conference room that overlooked the lobby. He knocked, let me in, and said, "She signed the NDA," then left to pursue other more interesting activities. I really wanted to watch him walk away, but that would have been rude to the two men standing across from me. Dr. Marquette! The shorter of the two men held out his hand to me across the conference table. I'm Fred Tucker, one of the owners of UFA. We figured one of us should be at the interview for the new crew, and I drew the short straw. His smile wavered, only understanding the slight after it left his mouth. Sorry. He held the hand I'd just shaken, hazel eyes wide behind round glasses. I'm more comfortable with a computer than I am with people. No worries, I said, smiling in what I hoped was a disarming manner. I can understand that. The other person in the room, a distinguished man wearing a pinstripe suit and who I guessed to be about 40 years old, was the director of operations, Derek Harrington. His darker skin and salted, thick black hair made me wonder if his ancestry was Bangladeshi. Then he opened his mouth and a posh London accent came out. A smile erupted inside me as I marveled at globalization and the diversity of our species. We finished the interview in record time. Really, it had just been Tucker giving me a sales pitch and a "can't wait to have you on board" spiel. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. In fact, I suspected I'd already completed the real interview in the truck with Nathan. So much for all those behavioral questions I'd prepared answers to. However, The bonus was that Tucker had knocked me out of my introverted information overload. He was a kindred spirit, someone else who didn't get on with people and preferred his own environment. Tucker departed with a smile and a wave and left me with Director Derek, who was a bit more reserved than his boss. I looked at Director Derek in his pinstripe blue suit and maroon tie and asked, "What kind of hours would I be looking at?" I was sucking as much as possible out of this experience until I was kicked to the curb or in an information coma. Director Derek adjusted his dark frame glasses. "Hopefully not too many days away. We try to get our people back for the weekends." I waited for the joke. Director Derek didn't seem like the type to joke. He wore a pinstripe suit, for Pete's sakes. That's bullshit. A small smirk darted across his face. "No, that's true. We pride ourselves on taking care of our employees and ensuring they stick around for a long time." "But the main gate is near Jupiter's orbit. Nathan said that UFA has developed its own Wu-Jing engine, but how does that shave years off a trip to Jupiter?" "The details are more Mr. Tucker's department or someone from astrophysics. But suffice to say, it is possible. We aim to make it a regular occurrence, and it is safe. Very safe." I stared at Director Derek in disbelief. I waited for the smile, the blink, the shake of a rumble of uncontainable laughter. None of that happened. These had to be famous last words. I'd heard these kinds of words before regarding safety, regarding schedules, and I'd always felt a kind of foreboding. But that weird sense of impending disaster wasn't there. "What you're describing is basically time travel." Derek's head bobbed as he thought about this. "I guess in a sense, yes. But only in the context of space travel. There wouldn't be time or space to do it any other way. Ha!" He finished, delighted with himself. That really shut me up. Now my mind was reeling, conjuring all the permutations of what could happen, good and bad, forwards and backwards, with whom, for what purposes, the consequences thereof. Dr. Marquette. I bounced out of my head, my eyes snapping back to his. "Would you like to see?" What would I be seeing exactly?" "Our ship. You have signed the NDA." Okay." I was still processing, and he was offering to give me more information. More information. I avoided academic conferences because of this. After one day, my brain was overloaded from a mere 6 hours of presentations. The new information, the peopling, the fluorescent lights and the smells, and yeah, it was a lot of sensory input for me, and I was feeling the same way now. I wasn't sure I'd be able to function for a few days after all this, but how can someone turn down an opportunity to actually see and touch a time machine? He motioned for me to follow him, and we left the interview room. I heard him say something into a small device. Down the elevator, through a hallway, then through a set of double doors that required him to swipe his pass. On the other side was a wide hallway and Nathan Ferrer. "Please take Dr. Marquette to the hangar. She'd like to see the jumper," Director Derek said, then turned to me. "It's been a pleasure. I sincerely hope UFA will be your future." He shook my hand, his eyes twinkling, then left back through the double doors. I had an overdeveloped bullshit detector, thanks to my dysfunctional family and working for organizations that love taking advantage of their employees. Lies, unintentional dishonesty, manipulation, and my gut would clench. Words would spout out of my mouth, or I'd find my body doing something other than what my mind was thinking. It is a primal response that saved me more times than I could count. Nothing here was registering on my detector. Everyone was being so nice, honest, forthcoming. It was weird. I must have stood staring after Director Derek for longer than necessary. Come on, Doc. We'll go for a walk. I walked beside Nathan down a hallway. Everyone we passed wore the same gray t-shirt and navy cargo pants as Nathan. It seemed to be the company brand. We continued past normal people. I didn't know if I was expecting to see aliens in the halls. Did Tucker talk your ear off? Nathan attempted conversation. Yeah, a bit. He was nice, though. I could feel Nathan's gaze on me as I looked at people in the halls, tried to guess at what lay behind closed doors and how far into the mountain we traveled. He seemed to gather that I wasn't up to talking just then, so walked in silence the rest of the trip. At the end of what had been a curved hallway, a set of double doors opened automatically, and we walked through. The hallway suddenly seemed confining as we entered a hangar, with the ceiling stretching far above. Painted lines on the glossy concrete floor denoted areas unknown to me. Toolboxes, trolleys, and other equipment were near the back of the hangar, where several windows looked into an office space. 2 men were inside, talking animatedly. An aircraft, or spacecraft, was on the floor in the middle of the hangar. I tried to reconcile this machine with the implication Derek had made. Space travel was essentially time travel. This was a time machine. The craft parked in the middle of the hangar floor was undergoing repairs, with a handful of people tinkering underneath, wires hanging, and more toolboxes situated nearby. It looked like an old Harrier aircraft crossed with a Firefly-class spaceship. Every science fiction movie and TV show I'd ever seen was sitting in front of me. If I could have shaken my head knowing it would help everything fall into place in my mind, I would have done it good and hard. Instead, I just wanted a stiff drink, chocolate, and a corner within which to huddle and sort through this all. To Nathan's credit, he remained quiet and let me take it all in. It looks so... I tried. Nathan turned with raised eyebrows. Futuristic? Foreboding? Normal. Ah, and I could sense his disappointment. Well, I suppose it depends on your version of normal. I grew up on science fiction and the Challenger explosion in 1986. You were expecting the Enterprise. Well, Nathan grinned, then stepped towards the machine, craft, ship thing. Come on and see the inside. It was no quantum leap to think that he was still aiming to impress, floor, or otherwise knock my socks off. I don't know why. I was just an anthropologist looking for a job. Then it hit me. This was the Golden Tour. I knew the routine of a Golden Tour. I'd given it a few times myself while at Tel Aviv University. The Golden Tour was reserved for those upon whom you were staking the future of the field school, the department, or even the faculty. The university usually gave it to potential big donors or others who could bring in prestige, recognition, or money. Usually my nose was so brown and my tongue so sticky with sugar after a Golden Tour, I couldn't stand myself for 2 weeks afterwards. Long before having a career, I'd learned the tactics of manipulation from Mother and my eldest brother, Theo. Most of the time, I refused to use these skills. However, I could use the skills when necessary, and during a Golden Tour, I went all out. Golden Tours could last for days, with meals going on for hours, and bills launching a faculty into the deep red. They were always a risk, but they usually panned out. Would a prospective donor know they were being manipulated, wined and dined to be later taken for all they were worth? Probably, but they liked it. And they were just as likely to be using their own manipulation and negotiation tactics on us. Now, for the first time in my life, I was being given a Golden Tour. Did I like it? Meh. At least I knew I was on a Golden Tour. I would be fed well. Did I intend to let myself be led down a merry path towards the slaughter door? Not on your life. Sure, I said to Nathan and gave my shrug an air of having nothing better to do at all at the moment, just because I could, and to see how he'd react. Nathan seemed not to care. Maybe he'd given the Golden Tour a few times too. Were you chosen to pick me up from the airport because you're invested in whoever's hired? Or because you could charm a teenage girl away from the cosmetics counter during a 50% off sale? A laugh burst out of him. Then he stopped and looked at me from the corner of his eye. I'm invested, he said, as if taking me into his confidence. However, I did once lure a girl into the bushes with me. Louisa May. We were in junior high. It was my turn to laugh. I didn't really want to because it would show he was getting to me. Again, I waited for my gut to ring an alarm that there was something dangerous lurking. But my gut was silent. Nathan was everything he appeared to be. I wasn't thrilled when she started seeing Tommy Johnson behind my back, though. But seriously, we need an anthropologist, he said, as if reading my mind. I worked with one when I was in the Marines, and they helped us become better at reading and responding to cultures we worked with, also within our ranks. Hiring an anthropologist was your idea? Yep, although I wasn't alone in the idea. I wanted to hire a woman, however, in that, I was alone. I looked at him sideways. We need diversity. A diverse group leads to increased creative capability and the ability to interact in innovative ways with other groups. If we can't accept internal variation in our own thoughts, how can we accept them with others? So just combine the anthropologist with a new female team member and you'll kill two birds. Well, I really hope no one gets killed, but yeah. I couldn't believe that space and time travel had been achieved, but human beings were still grappling with diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Yeah, I don't know how we'd survive this long either. Frankly, I'm thinking we should run into some aliens who will demand we demonstrate that we've earned the right to venture beyond our own planet. Tollgate aliens. Yeah. Two men came out of the office. Both were wearing the standard issue gray t shirt and navy cargo pants, but one had accessorized with a gaudy orange Hawaiian shirt. Hey, Nathan, the one in the Hawaiian shirt said. He also looked like he'd stepped out of a Bollywood movie with that wide, bright smile, full lips, and hooked nose. What's up? Dr. Elise Marquette. Nathan gestured to the Bollywood star in a Hawaiian shirt. This is Tony Kirkshaw, pilot and mechanic. I shook his hand and his smile widened. And this is Will Lansbridge, who is our computer expert. Will Lansbridge was a tall, lanky sort with pasty skin, making me think he'd been living in his mother's basement until recently. We shook hands, and his was cool and clammy. I'm giving Dr. Marquette the tour and hoping to impress her enough to join us. Can we go inside the ship? Nathan asked. Yeah, sure, Tony said. We ripped out the second hard drive because it wasn't backing up properly. A door on the side of the fuselage was open with a collapsible step ladder in position. Nathan stepped up first and led me inside. There aren't too many people like you, Dr. Marquette. Oh? Do tell, Mr. Ferrer. He chuckled. A metallic tang hit my senses as soon as my feet touched the floor of the ship. Everything was metal. Could I live in a metal box for the rest of my days? It's your diverse background, your adaptability, Nathan continued as he led me through the ship. It was bare bones, outfitted, I guessed, for quick missions. Benches lined the walls with weapons and equipment locked into holders near the front. Nathan chatted away as we walked down a hallway up to the cockpit, past a set of horizontal doors stacked on either side of us. There aren't too many female anthropologists who work in the lab, in the field, work with the living and the dead, and aren't afraid of taking up arms to defend herself. I was wondering if that was going to come up. Nathan motioned for me to have a seat in the cockpit. I sat and said, "So, was it my vagina or the killing of a Chinese soldier that got me the interview at UFA?" To his credit, Nathan managed to put his butt in the other seat and nod onto the floor. It was a close call, though. "Look, okay, I'll level with you." "Please do." I leaned back and had a look around me. "I've had experience with economists, political scientists, and psychologists trying to navigate cultural challenges. UFA has some of these people on staff. They're not the same as anthropologists." His words had an edge, like he had had to make this justification before and had come up against some opposition. I flicked a switch, then toggled it back just to see if it or he would do anything. "So you want a female anthropologist to add to your collection?" Nathan reached out but didn't quite touch my hand. "That's for the engines. I recommend not switching it on unless you want to kill the technicians outside and make me give death notices to a bunch of families." I pulled my hand back. "No, maybe I misspoke." Nathan tried again. He twisted in his seat to sit crossways and look at me. "Economists, political scientists, and psychologists aren't trained anthropologists. They don't specialize in cultures, what they are, how to interpret them, how to interact with them. I've seen them fuck up sensitive situations because they can't see from the other culture's perspective. We need to understand cultures so we can talk and build a relationship. We need someone who can cross that cultural divide so we can actually do business." "How do you know so much about anthropology?" That familiar smirk appeared. "Bachelor in sociology with a minor in anthropology before I enlisted." I raised my eyebrows. That was unexpected. "So I'd be the first?" "If you accept the position." I waved a hand towards the back of the ship. "Would we live here?" "No." He looked back at the ship with a touch of pride. "This is our jumper. It's meant only for short trips, flying from the main ship to our destination." "Where's the main ship?" "In orbit," he said and rose. "Come on, time for lunch." 2 hours later, I sat on a bench in the late afternoon sun just outside the mountain headquarters of the United Free Agents, my mind reeling. I had to get out of the enclosed space. I needed to see the sky, smell unfiltered air. If I accepted this job, I'd likely never want for money again. I still had $30,000 owing to Theo for schooling and travel. I'd long ago resigned myself to forever being in debt to my brother. Accepting this job also included a one-time $30,000 signing bonus. Very fortuitous, I know. However, I'd be in space, in a tin can. No grass, trees, or birds. The pine cones stirred under my toe as I swung my shoe back and forth in the loamy soil of the Colorado environs. I inhaled the scent of soil and pine and thought of all those times I'd been out in the bush as a consulting archaeologist and taking it all for granted. I'd rushed through projects, not wanting to be there. Anywhere but there. I'd grown to resent that time in the forest. It was a means to an end. I needed to get in, do the job, and get out. All I ever wanted was just to have the day over with. I had never been happy in the now. The now had sucked pretty bad. The PhD journey hadn't been too bad, but it had been over too quickly to fully savor. The war had also been in the middle of it. I had completed my comprehensive exam in the spring, was supervising my second season of field school, and was just about to begin my third year when the war officially started. I had been in the right place at the right time for recruitment into Physicians for Human Rights and to be knee-deep in dead people. For a biological anthropologist, which is what I really was with only a side of archaeology, it was a dream come true. I used to have dreams of working with PHR, digging up mass graves and helping to identify victims of war crimes. The reality was far from the dream. PHR had been a now that lasted a year. And I can say with solid certainty that it had been a now I couldn't leave fast enough. It was a now that rose up every once and again, waking suddenly from a dream I couldn't remember, a shout across the market that had me ducking, children running across the pavement. The past seemed to call out across time, like fingers brushing over my soul. The sound of gunfire pounding through my body, ear-splitting missile shrieks, the eerie silence just before a missile struck, then the screams and carnage after. It had been a full sensory overload with no relief. 5 years wasn't enough time to put behind me something that big, that horrific, and that intense. You'll have to normalize the war as part of you, my therapist, Dr. Robassi, said during my first of 6 sessions of mandatory therapy. No one can survive that and not have PTSD. The problem was I didn't want it to be part of me. I wanted to remove that time surgically from my life. Consulting archaeology had nothing on victim identification in a war zone. The metal all around me on the jumper ship had reminded me of the war. In the hangar, I could feel the war looming. Even after all the therapy, I could feel myself tense and ready for a sensory assault I could not avoid. But it didn't come. I'd be a rocket man in Elton John's song, working by day in space, home for the weekends, if everything went according to plan. It really was time travel to travel light years and be back for the weekend. I could pay off my debt to Theo. I could finally make some money and start saving. The day I could no longer work was coming up quickly. Retirement would be welcome, but not if I was poor and homeless. I was reminded of this every time I went into the field. My back hurt, my knees ached. I was sore at the end of the day. My walk up and down excavation trenches was getting slower every year. I was only 43, but the mornings I felt closer to 80 was becoming more frequent. I could also finally get away from the incessant meddling of my family. Although, to be honest, that had died down a bit with Mother now gone. The question was if I wanted this now. I wonder if Dr. Rabassi would be open to weekend online appointments. Always a glutton, I called my brother Sebastian. I have a job offer. Awesome. Sebi was in a good mood today. Sebastian was the middle child and often played the buffer between me and Theo. I looked at the time. It was nearing 3 p.m., but he'd taken time off work to clear out our mother's place. What's it for? Or should I say, where's it for? Shit, I knew this was a bad idea. I'm in Colorado. It's a cultural liaison position. Well, Colorado isn't far. Same time zone, at least. I will be gone for long periods of time. Out of contact. Oh? Even satellite phone? Yeah. How about email? I don't know. Maybe infrequent? I rubbed a hand over my face because I knew I was going to take the job and was already regretting it. Oh, okay. Seb and I were close, or had been at one point. I'd been his major support system through a divorce. Now it often felt like I was just an anonymous ear on the other end of the phone. How's the sorting going? I asked. Slow but sure. Hey, I found a box of your old books. Do you want me to save it? Yeah, maybe save it. I don't know when I'll be home next. Christmas, maybe. It'd been a long time since I'd said that. Since my archaeology days. What else are you finding? Sebi breathed deeply. Well, there was still a lot of dad stuff in the basement. Oh, really? Like what? Fishing gear, golf clubs, a poker table. A box of photos. They were mostly of you when you were little. I'm guessing from when you and Dad took off on all those weekends. In a blink, I was back at the cabin, with Dad setting up the camera on a log and waving me to move over a touch more to the left. Our ATVs were behind me with a stand of white spruce providing a backdrop. He set the timer on the camera, then rushed over to grab me into a half hug as the camera's shutter snapped. We were gushing with joy, and only an overexposed picture from the 1980s could begin to capture what we'd felt. I'd love to see some of those. Snap me some shots if you have a chance. We chatted a bit more, never saying all that much. It felt as if we both knew this would be the last time in a long time that we'd be able to talk, and we didn't want to wreck it with deep philosophical pondering or family business. I finally signed off and took a deep breath of my freedom among the Colorado pines amidst the Rocky Mountains, then walked back to the security guards and the lobby of the UFA building.